something very warm here. I guess it's a surface. I like it. I'm cold and tired.
Oh.
This thing's a little weird.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome to the Public Safety Special Called Meeting on Assessment of Traffic Stops and Policing Strategies in Nashville's reports. We've got Mr. Marcus Floyd, who's going to do the introductions. He's with the Public Safety and Policy Advisor for the Mayor's Office. Mr. Floyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, well, all gentlemen at this point of the Public Safety Committee. Thank you for your time. Mr. Chairman said, my name is Marcus Floyd. I serve as the Public Safety and Justice Advisor on policy for Mayor David Briley. Mayor Briley asked that I guide the administration's work with the policing project, and so there are members of the policing project here today to speak with you about the results of their traffic stop study. You've probably heard Mayor Briley speak about pursuing a 21st century approach to policing. Ultimately, pursuing a 21st century approach to policing means pursuing justice and pursuing truth. And so that's what, the policing project is here today to talk to us about. I myself, grew up in the Edge Hill projects. And growing up, my mom was hesitant to let me go outside because she was afraid. She was afraid for my safety. She was afraid for the safety of my brothers. So she didn't let them go outside either. Shortly after Jaquise Clemens was killed over at Casey Homes, I went to Casey Homes and had a conversation with a mother there who expressed the same concerns that my mom had expressed years earlier. The mom in Casey Homes said that she was afraid. She talked about her fears that allowing her kids to go outside might cause them to be the victims of crime. But she also talked about another fear that my mom had. She talked about her fears that allowing her kids to go outside might cause them to be victims of police misconduct or harassment by the police. And so, as a city, we have to have honest conversations about policing in this city. And the policing project is here today to talk to us, to give us a little bit of truth about the traffic stop policy that we're going to hear about today. We're going to use data provided by them. We're going to use their results to help us determine a path forward in how we police and make policies to make Nashville a safer, more equitable city. And we owe that to the citizens of Nashville. We owe it to them to seek the truth about how our policing strategies impact their lives. We owe it to the citizens of Nashville to give them a voice in how they're policed, and that's what we're going to do going forward. The Policing Project is a nonprofit that works to ensure just and effective policing through democratic accountability. Specifically, they help police departments identify best practices. They work with police departments to write model policies on issues ranging from the use of force to the use of policing technology. Key aspect of the policing project is their work with communities and police departments to develop structures to ensure that communities have a voice in how they're policed. Policing project is led by Mr. Barry Friedman, who is here to speak with us today. Professor Friedman taught at Vanderbilt University for over a decade. He currently serves as a professor at NYU School of Law. He has authored Unwarranted, and he is leading currently a national standard-setting effort on policing for the American Law Institute. And so I'll turn it over to Professor Friedman now.
Thank you, Marcus. Good afternoon, everybody. coming into this room, I'm reminded of the last time that I was in this room. Phil Bredesen was the mayor, and I was sitting on the other side of the room. I'd been nominated to be on the Charter Revision Commission, so the only thing that I'm sure has changed in the interim is that I am very much older. To my right is Alex Cholas-Wood from the Stanford Computational Policy Lab. So this is the team of folks that have worked on this project. That's not our entire staff. Those are on our websites. When this became clear that it was going to be a data project, we sought some of the best data scientists that we could find, and those are the folks at Stanford, and we've been glad to have their help. If you look on the far upper right, there's a gentleman who does some work with us. He's a former commissioner for public safety in the state of Massachusetts and was the chief of the Cambridge Police Department. And we work with him on a number of projects. Total coincidence, when I contacted him about Nashville, he was already working here with the federal Public Safety Partnerships Violence Reduction Network, and so he was very familiar with many of the folks who were involved. So that's the group. I also just wanted to say, because Marcus said a couple of times that they worked with our data, that actually what we did was work with MNPD's data, and that throughout this entire process, MNPD has been extremely forthcoming and cooperative in terms of helping us answer the questions that we wanted to ask. So I want to do 4 things today. I want to tell you about how we came to be here and our initial advice to the city. Well, I'll tell you now, we were called initially by then Mayor Megan Barry in response to the Jacques Clemens shooting and the Gideon's Army report concerned with racial disparities in policing. And the question was, what can we do about community trust in policing? I want to tell you what our answer was, our advice to 2 mayors. I want to go over some of the data that we've with the help of the folks from Stanford, put together. And then I have a set of recommendations. The first thing I'd like to do, though, can everybody hear okay? This mic sounds weird to my ears, but it's going okay for everybody else? Okay. But first, what I wanted to do is just tell you a little bit about the work the Policing Project does and our approach to things, because it's somewhat different than other organizations. We're conscious of that because a lot of the other turf is covered by other organizations, and it gives a framework for the things that we're going to recommend. So it can be no secret to anybody in this room that in addition to the issues in Nashville, there's been great concern around the country about policing. And when that concern is expressed and people look for solutions, they often look for what we refer to as back-end accountability. So those are the things like what you see on the list: civil lawsuits, criminal prosecutions, civilian review boards. Even body cameras are a form of back-end accountability. What that means is something has happened. People want to know what happened. They want to know who's responsible for what happened, and that's an important part of any system. I'm going to say a bit more about it in a moment. Obviously, these have all been, or many of these have been discussed in Nashville. You now have a community oversight board, which does some back-end accountability, though it also has front-end functions. But when we looked at the world, what was missing was front-end accountability. So this is the first time I have ever talked about the Policing Project's work in front of a legislative body, so it's ironic, and this body will understand better than any group with which I have ever spoken. But when we think about accountability in government, we don't usually think instantly about the back end. We think about the front end, about the public having views about how government runs. Things like sets of rules and policies, transparency, public input, and a hope always that we're going to do more good than harm, something you might think of as sort of cost-benefit analysis. And when we look at the landscape of policing across the country, there's been a lot of attention to back-end accountability and very little to front-end accountability, and that's where we've stepped in with our work. As Marcus said, writing model policies, conducting cost-benefit analysis like I'm going to talk about today, but where we've done in other parts of the country around things like ShotSpotter or de-escalation training, and worrying about transparency. Now, I just want to make an important point, particularly at the juncture in which this city, which is any healthy system has front-end and back-end accountability. So those of you that are at businesses or have businesses, you'd never think of running a business or a government entity and not having back-end accountability for when things went wrong. That's just a natural part of any system. But you also need front-end accountability. The two are supposed to work together. So in an ideal system, the front end sets rules and policies that need to be followed by anybody in an organization, and that sets the standards then for the back end when there's going to be a question of what went wrong. By the same token, the back end is super important because when you look at issues on the back end, you often identify where there's something needed on the front end. And so again, we work on the front end of this system primarily, and that sort of defines the advice that we gave to the mayor when she first called. And this is the same advice that we gave Mayor Briley. So we suggested that, it's 3 bullet points there, but basically 2 things happen. The first was that we felt that the Gideon's Army report had provided an excellent roadmap, but that there was an opportunity in Nashville to do something additional that frankly had not been done in this country, which was to look at stops. So throughout this country, police departments use traffic stops and they use pedestrian stops. I'm sure you've heard a lot about stop and frisk as a tool for crime fighting. But no one had really done an accounting of the social costs of those stops and done a close look at the efficacy of traffic stops. And so we suggested that that happen. So we were glad to look at the issues in the Gideon's Army report, but we felt it was essential to do something beyond that that could answer a question for this city and perhaps for the country. And the other was that we told 2 mayors that we thought it was essential, consistent with our mission of front-end accountability, to have a community-driven process to look at policing in Nashville. So the latter has not happened, though there is now a community oversight board and that may be the vehicle. But the former is what we have spent a good chunk of time doing. So in our, it's, I guess, roughly 2 years now in Nashville, we've had many conversations. We're going to hand out a report at the end, and there's a list of maybe 4 dozen folks that we talked to, stakeholders from different parts of the community about their concerns and thoughts about policing. We had many focus groups with MNPD officers and command staff, primarily command staff, commanders, about how policing happens and why. We went on ride-alongs, which it doesn't mention there. We gathered a great deal of data. The folks at Stanford Computational Policy Lab analyzed it. We're going to bring you recommendations today, and then there's an opportunity for the public, obviously, to react. So turning to the data work, which is where I'm going to focus primarily until we get to recommendations, we asked 4 questions. First, as was asked by the Gideon's Army report, are there racial disparities in policing in Nashville, in the traffic stops? Second, can we explain any racial disparities if they exist? Third, are traffic stops an effective tool for fighting crime? And finally, what about the social costs of those stops? If it's an effective tool, at what cost? So those are the things I'm going to discuss with you today. We're going to start with this chart, which shows the history of traffic stops in Nashville. And the top line is total stops running from 2011 to 2017. And you'll see there's a peak in 2012 of well over 400,000 stops, about 460 some, I think it is. And then down to 2017, there's about 250,000 traffic stops. So there's a drop. By the way, the projections aren't here, but looking at the data over the following year, they seem to have then leveled off. The lines below it are moving and non-moving violations. Now, that's not the language that MNPD precisely uses, but you'll see why it's important for what we're going to talk about. So moving violations are things like speeding, driving under the influence. Non-moving violations are things like taillight out, license plate light out, tinted windows, and then there's a collection of other stops. But as you see over time, there's been this drop, and that's going to be important later, in traffic stops. So how does Nashville stack up to the rest of the country? And this is, again, an elaboration of what the Gideon's Army report said, but the top green line is where Nashville was in traffic stops in 2012. The middle line there, the second green line, is where Nashville is in 2017. And then there's a collection of cities that are a combination of some that were in the Gideon's Army report, some for which the Stanford lab has data. It's hard to get this kind of data. The cities roughly are between 500,000 and 1 million people, though not precisely, but they're comparable cities. And as you can see quite clearly, Nashville's conducting a lot more traffic stops than any other city. We've not found another city that was doing more than Nashville. This is what we've come across, from a high in El Paso of still under 200,000 all the way down to San Jose, which is a small enough bump that I can't tell you precisely how many it is, but it looks to be that Nashville's doing at least 5 times as many as some of those cities. A lot more traffic stops. So I want to turn to racial disparities in a minute, but first I want to tell you why MNPD performs these traffic stops. So again, to be clear, police departments throughout the country conduct stops, pedestrian and traffic stops, as a crime-fighting tool. And in our focus groups with MNPD, it was quite clear that officers are trained to look beyond the stop, to take advantage of the fact that officers have spotted a violation, to then conduct investigation. Look in the car, talk to the driver, run a warrant check, run a license check. The theory being, I think, threefold, that you, in doing this, might find somebody who's responsible for other criminal offenses, or that you might apprehend somebody who might conduct other criminal offenses, or just the police presence, perhaps heavy police presence, will act as a deterrent to crime. So that's the theory of why the stops happen. So are there racial disparities in the traffic stops? So the first thing I want to do is just make a point about the word disparity. So disparity means difference, as we all know. It means that there's a different outcome for different groups, whichever groups you're comparing. It doesn't tell you why the disparities are happening. And in particular, it's not the same as when we sort of talk legally about discrimination, by which we usually mean intentional racial animus or other animus if it's another type of group. It's just a disparity. We'll say more about causes in a moment. So if you look at this chart, the indication here is 3 lines for Black, white, and Hispanic members of the population in Nashville. And what's been done is that the data's been normalized so that each line reflects at a different point in time how many out of 1,000 folks from that group would be stopped during the course of a year, out of 1,000 folks. So you see in 2012 that, perhaps somewhat remarkably, that out of 1,000 African-American folks, roughly 1,300 would be stopped, whereas the disparity was 800 folks who are white. And by the way, this trend line of Hispanic stops being lower than the black and white lines is true throughout the country. By the time you get down to 2017, the numbers have dropped, but the disparity persists. So you are stopping somewhat over 600,000 folks who are African American out of 1,000, and somewhat over 400 folks who are white. There's an interesting thing about the disparities. So last year, the per capita stop rate was 44% higher for African American folks than white folks. But if you break that down, remember the categories that I told you about non-moving violations and moving violations, you'll see that the disparities are notably higher in the non-moving violations. So for that reason, as you'll see, a lot of the focus that we've done was on those non-moving violations. Now, why do these racial disparities exist? Can we explain it? So I'm going to show you 3 maps of Nashville. The first here has dots. It's difficult to see the color coding, but it won't matter for what I'm about to explain. But it represents people in different demographic groups. But all the dots are the population in Nashville, distributed throughout the city, though it's a little hard to see the blue, but there's dots distributed throughout the whole city. This map is non-moving violation stops. Now, if you ask MNPD why there might be these disparities, MNPD's explanation is not that they are targeting black neighborhoods, but that they are going after the crime, that they are going places where the crime occurs, and that might explain why there's racial disparity. So if you look at the map where you can see the stops happening, and here there's areas, for example, down in, to the bottom left in Green Hills and Belmead, where there aren't so many stops. And then what you do is superimpose over that. You can do this visually, though this is far more dramatic than it looks in this room, at least on the screen I'm looking at. You see a really, really close appearing correlation between where crime is happening and where the stops are happening. And you'll see it, I think, better in the report. The cutouts look the same. Giving credence to MNPD's argument that they're not targeting neighborhoods based on race, but they're targeting where the crime is. And what the folks at Stanford sought to do in a number of ways is identify how much of that 68% disparity is attributable to going where the crime is. So controlling for crime, what you find is that the disparity drops from 68 to 37%. So it explains a big chunk of the disparity, but it does not explain all of the disparity. And in fact, if you look at the moving violations, it drops from 24% to 15%. Much more of it explained overall. So why the disparity? Well, we don't have an answer for you. But I'm here to offer some suggestions of what might account for the disparity, as well as then we're going to see whether the stop's effective, which are going to bear upon how we should think about this. So, look, it could be explicit bias on the part of some officers. I prefer to think that people aren't biased in that way, but it's a possibility. Certainly, there's been a great deal of conversation and science and research in this country about implicit racial biases. We all have them. They come out in the things that we do, including policing. One of the very interesting possible explanations for disparity, though, is that when you look, because remember those figures are very different for non-moving and moving violations, is that when you think about equipment stops, stops that have to do with car not being registered, taillights out, it does stand to reason that there would be some correlation between that and socioeconomic status, that folks that are poor are going to have cars that are in less good condition or can't afford the registration checkup, and that might explain some of the disparity, because it is a fact in this city, as in many places, that there's a correlation between race and socioeconomic status. But I want to turn now, though we can certainly come back to it with questions, to the question we critically stepped in to try to answer, which is, do these stops work? Are they an effective crime-fighting tool? And the folks at Stanford used 3 separate strategies. They looked at long-term crime rates, they looked at short-term crime rates, and then they looked at what sometimes is called productivity of stops. You know, were the stops turning up folks that were either carrying things like contraband weapons, or were they folks for whom there ultimately were arrests? And I'm just going to walk through the 3 of these. So in terms of long-term reduction, the analysis is easily grasped from this chart, this graph, which graphs at the top, that's just that line we've seen over and over, all the stops in Nashville over this 6-year period. And then the line below it, the other yellow line, is the non-moving violations. But what's interesting, I'm sure you can see this already, is that as the number of stops plummet, the crime rate doesn't change at all. It stays flat throughout, and that's both relatively flat throughout, and that's both what we call Part 1 crimes or index crimes. Those are things like burglary, robbery, homicide, sexual offenses, or the violent crime line. So from a long-term perspective, MNPD managed to reduce stops over that 5-year period by roughly 200,000 stops a year, and no effect on the crime rate. Now, we could show you the technical slides, but I'm just going to explain to you about the short-term analysis, because it's one of the most fascinating things that the folks from Stanford did. It's where a lot of the math happened. When you look at the report, there's lots of equations that I think I can explain it colloquially in terms we can all get. It takes a while to look at the graphs, though everybody that's seen them thinks that they're quite notable. So what the folks at the Stanford lab did, MNPD reports data on what they call reporting areas. And that's the smallest geographic unit that they use to calculate crimes, reported crime, traffic stops, a lot of other things. And the Stanford lab folks went, and for a year, they gathered data on every single reporting area week by week. And they looked in each week at stops going up and falling, and it reported crimes going up and falling. They controlled for a bunch of stuff like seasonality. You know, there's a lot of thought that crime varies depending upon what season that it is. And when they did that and they ran their regression analysis, what they found was there was absolutely no relationship. It was really quite stark. No relationship in the short term between stops rising and falling and crime rates. And finally, the third thing that they did was they looked at, well, what gets turned up in stops? Are we finding folks that, need to be found? And what they found was that in about 21 stops out of every 1,000, someone was arrested or there was recovery of contraband. 2%. Now, it may be hard to know how to think about that, but here's something that's maybe useful, which is that they also looked at the data for investigatory stops, which are, generally speaking, stops where the officer has cause to believe that there's criminality. And you see that when an officer stops in situations where there's cause to believe that there's criminality, the hit rate, the productivity rate goes up substantially. I also just want to point out, and I think this is important, particularly here in Tennessee at the moment, even though 2% of the stops, and then I think it's roughly 6%, 2% result in arrests or seizure of contraband. I think it's another 6 or 6.5% result in summons. Those numbers are themselves a bit misleading, depending upon how you want to think of the data, in the following sense. A large number of those are for either small amounts of marijuana, or more importantly, I think, suspended or revoked licenses. So a fair number of the people who are arrested for, or given a summons, that happens for having a suspended license. And as some of you probably know, maybe all of you, the federal court here in Nashville has twice now ruled that it violates the Constitution to suspend people's licenses or revoke them for unpaid traffic fines and court costs. And don't know how much of that, but undoubtedly some amount of those folks that are arrested or issued summons had licenses suspended, most likely because there'd been a failure to pay. So in the regime in which, though the state has appealed, if those rulings are upheld, those won't happen anymore. Just to recap, black drivers stopped at a higher rate than whites, particularly for non-moving violations. A chunk of that disparity is explained by deployment to high-crime neighborhoods, but not all of it. And the traffic stops don't appear to reduce crime. So the question becomes, how should we think about this and what might be done? In thinking about that, I just want to say a word about the social costs of traffic stops. I think this is important. So we talked to a lot of folks in the city, and many of them in the African-American community across all walks of life, told stories about having been stopped by MNPD officers. Some of those stories were quite painful to hear. And these are the sorts of things that people identified as the social costs they experience. The time costs, psychological costs, the stress of the stop, dignitary costs, many people felt they were being racially profiled, privacy costs, a reduction of community trust. These are things that even were the stops effective, we'd want to be thinking about to figure out whether they were net effective. I'll also add to this list that we talked to a number of MNPD officers who were concerned about the policy of conducting so many stops. And of course, there's the question of whether Nashville is using its police resources most appropriately in fighting crime by deploying to use this many traffic stops. So what to do? So we have recommendations that fall into 3 buckets. The first bucket is, if the traffic stops are not effective, and particularly in light of the social costs, then the idea is to cease conducting this many traffic stops. Now, that's a little bit more complicated than it might seem, and I just want to make this point because it's super important. It leads to another recommendation about what kinds of tactics we ought to deploy the officers to. So, not only has MNPD been cooperative in terms of the data, but we've met with them on several occasions, on many occasions, and we've presented this data to them. We did it with the chiefs and we did it with the commanders. I think it was certainly painful, and there was understandably some defensiveness about the tactic. But all told, they were willing to accept what they were hearing. They had a lot of questions, but they were willing to accept what they were hearing. And they were eager to have a conversation. They remain eager to have a conversation about alternative policing tactics. But this is a department that for a long period of time, since Ron Surpass was the chief here, has been conducting a lot of stops. That's what they're trained on. And so it's not like it's easy to just say, stop the stops. The question we hear from everyone is, what should we be doing? And one of the things that we have recommended to the department and that it is interested in pursuing is what we call neighborhood policing. Now, you've heard about community policing. It gets talked about a lot. And community policing is this idea that the police should form good relationships with the community through a variety of activities and meetings. And community policing has been used widely in the United States, but it's often happened at a time where there were some community policing officers, and then there were the ones doing the, I have air quotes if anybody's recording this, the real policing. And in a sense, what the real policing folks did in the same neighborhoods where there was community policing going on was enforce, enforce, enforce. And so they're working against each other because it's hard to build relationships in a community where there's a lack of trust because of heavy enforcement. Neighborhood policing is the notion that a department ought holistically to work on building relationships with its community. What we have learned over several decades now is that heavy enforcement is often not effective. And when it is effective, and there are studies that show that it's effective in some ways, it's at limited geographical hotspots for short periods of time, and then it dissipates. But what police chiefs tell us all over the country is that in neighborhoods that are plagued by crime and violence, they do not get cooperation from the people that live in those neighborhoods. If there's a homicide, if there are shots fired, people don't call the cops. If there's a homicide, people don't cooperate. And the reason is that there's alienation in these communities between the police and the people that they are sworn to protect. Neighborhood policing, and I'd be glad to talk more about it, puts officers into the community, out of their cars. It releases them from radio calls so that they have time to develop relationship with community members and build trust in those communities by working collaboratively to, in the words of the 21st Century Task Force report, co-produce public safety. And there's an interest in doing that here. It takes training and it takes work to do it. We're working in Chicago right now in a pilot district that was just announced by the superintendent and some community groups there to do the same sort of thing, and we highly recommend it. And I'll also just say, we think it's important for the city in some way to acknowledge the years of policing that employed these tactics that were had racially disparate effects and were not effective. The second bucket is things that we think are healthy in light of some of the events in Nashville and consistent with front-end accountability. So I should say MNPD is a very transparent department in many ways. They make more data readily available than many other police departments. We've recommended that they get their policy manual on the web so that people can see what the policies are. We've recommended a review of the policies on things like use of force, procedural justice, consent searches, and also to ensure that the officers are being trained consistently with those policies. I know that Nashville's moving to body cameras. We've worked in LA and in New York and in Camden on body camera policies, Cleveland, many places, including in LA on the policy that now has been adopted as the law in the state of California for release of video after an officer-involved shooting. And it's essential, if you are spending the money that I know you are spending on body cameras, and if you are doing it for trust and legitimacy reasons, to ensure that your policy has provisions for release of video at the appropriate times, whether it's by people who have complaints about the police or whether it's after a critical incident. Otherwise, you undermine the transparency that you're seeking. And finally, I want to talk about a strategic vision for public safety here in the city. So this city has grown, as you all know, remarkably since I lived here. I have trouble navigating in parts of downtown because the landmarks have changed so much. Some of that's good economically. There's a bustling downtown that didn't exist. Some of it is tricky. There's a lot of gentrification. There's a lot of tension around gentrification. People are being pushed out of neighborhoods. Rents and property values are going up. But all of this poses a challenge for policing. So we did not pursue this carefully. This is casual empiricism from me, and one might want to look more carefully. But our sense is that MNPD is under-resourced. I told this to the chief the first time we met, for a city growing like this, of this size. And certainly if you're going to pursue neighborhood policing, that's a somewhat more expensive way of policing. But more fundamentally, to my knowledge, there's not been a set of discussions in this community and in this city about what you want public safety to look like in light of this very changed city. And consistent with our views about front-end accountability, we think it's essential, not just that MNPD do that, but that you, the council, or some part of the city, perhaps the COB, work together with the department on a strategic vision for this city. That's what I got. We're happy to take questions.
All right, thank you, Professor Friedman. Council members, just so you know, we have copies. Mr. Marcus over here, he has copies of these reports. We're going to hand those out, but we just wanted your undivided attention. So if you would, if you have any questions, comments, please. At this time, we've got about 25 minutes, so let's just be mindful of that. Mr. Bedney, you're recognized.
Thank you for the report and the information. I have two questions. The first one is, I did a ride-along with a police officer once, and there was just one officer in the car. And when they had to deal with a situation where a person was being victimized by their spouse, they had to wait for another vehicle to come in to take care of them. Are we somehow guilty of underfunding the police so they cannot have more than one officer per car, or that's a national standard on policing? The second question is, I get many complaints from people in my district about lack of enforcement on speeding, on moving violations, and my district is low crime area. Do you see that if we refocus how we use the police capacity, that we could be handling quality of life issues in other parts of the city more effectively? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take the second first, which is to say, you know, this is consistent with our third recommendation, that the city look strategically at how it wants to police throughout the city. And traffic safety is an important thing. I hear quality of life, and I want to be careful because I live in a city where there was a big emphasis on quality of life policing that led to a lot of people being incarcerated. I think something the city now regrets. But it is important to think about policing the whole city, and traffic safety is important. And I believe MNPD is stretched. One of the things we hear is that, you know, everywhere you go, police officers are happy to earn overtime, and here they're happy not to, frankly, sometimes, because there's so much of it being foisted on them. And so those are good questions. On the one officer in a car, I'm actually going to see if Alex wants to add anything, but this is one of the great debates in policing, you know, about whether one car versus one officer versus two officer patrol. Many police officers prefer two officers in the car. Some jurisdictions put two officers in the car at night, but not during the day. I have not assessed all of the evidence and won't pretend to know what the right answer to that question is, but it's a fair question.
All right. Thank you, Councilman. Council Lady Vercher, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Friedman, for being here. Just for the viewing audience, if you can go through the timeline briefly and also the scope. You referenced Gideon's Army report throughout your presentation. My question is your product here that you're presenting to us, are you building upon that? Because as a body, a lot of what you've already alluded to, with all due respect, we already know. And I know y'all put a lot of work and effort into this. So that's my first, if you could go back to that. My second is your group, are y'all part of PERF, or you're not part of PERF? Okay. So for the viewing audience, what PERF is Police Executive Research Forum. And they do this type of work also, where they do policy papers and so forth. Okay. Also, this is my last question, because you didn't give us a lot of background about the policing project. And this is, again, for the viewing audience. There's 13 stars as it relates on your website that you're working with, but you only list 9 cities. What's the other 4 cities that you guys are doing work with? Okay, that's another question. And then, Chair, this is my very last question. when you were comparing the cities, we always have to be mindful that we're comparing apples to apples because we are a metropolitan government. Los Angeles policing is totally different from how we police here in Nashville. The accountability framework is different from Nashville relative to Los Angeles also. Many cities have their sheriff department are integrated into law enforcement, so they write tickets also. So I don't know, again, we don't have the report. I don't know if your sample is taken into account for that to make sure that what you're presenting isn't skewed. Again, a lot of this data, we've already heard it. It's been presented to us from Gideon's Army. So I don't know where your data is expanding from where that report left off, and if you can share that.
Sure. So I'm going to leave your last question about the cities to let Alex handle at the end. And I'll say some things about the policing project, and then I'll move to the question about Gideon's Army. I'd be happy to talk at endless length to anybody who'd like to about the policing project, and had intended to talk more, but was concerned about how long the presentation would take. We work in here's the cities I will rattle off the top of my head. I'm not sure I can remember or answer which are the missing stars, but we've done work in...
You have New York, Chicago, Camden, Cleveland, Los Angeles, Tucson, and Tampa.
Let me think, and I'll figure out where the other stars are. So that's right. It's the other cost-benefit studies that we do. So it's Roanoke, Virginia, where we're looking at pursuit policies. Asheville, we're looking at de-escalation training, and St. Louis County for ShotSpotter. So there's the others. You asked about PERF. We're not related to PERF in any way. It's a completely independent organization, much larger than we are. But as it happens, the president of PERF at the moment, who's the chief of Camden Police, is the co-chair of our advisory body. The other co-chair is Vanita Gupta, who is the former head of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice and is currently the head of the Leadership Conference for Civil Rights. So those are our co-chairs, but we're independent from PERF. In terms of the timeline and what we add, we were first called in the spring of 2016 by then Mayor Barry, I can't remember, council member, with all due respect, whether you were in the room right at the beginning, but we suggested to the mayor then and have suggested to Mayor Briley since that two things happen: a cost-benefit study and community engagement around policing in Nashville. And what we did builds on Gideon's Army, but is distinctively different. So we certainly, with a different set of data from a different year, find similarly to Gideon's Army that there are a lot of stops and that there are racial disparities. We do a couple of things, but one notably beyond that, which is that we figure out that the stops are not effective. And that's important for any number of reasons, one of which is, particularly if the goal is to persuade the police department that it ought to police differently, it's compelling evidence to them that there's a problem if, in fact, they are devoting an enormous number of resources to a strategy that is just not fighting crime. And that wasn't in the Gideon's Army report, and that is something novel that we set out to do here. We also set out to talk about the social costs, and we've identified some of the social costs. I did it in the slide right back here. I would very much have loved to have done a very careful quantitative study trying to put the value on those social costs. One of my passions is doing that around policing, because I think that what happens when we adopt policing strategies is that we don't often think about the social costs of those strategies, and yet to decide whether a strategy is wise or not, we'd want to do that. It would be expensive to do that, though we could do it. We'd be happy to do it. We were looking for a place in the country to do it. We wanted to do it here. And I won't say it's irrelevant. I think it's highly relevant. But because the stops aren't effective, there's less of a need to weigh anything because the stops aren't effective. Do you have an answer to the question about the...
Yeah, just really briefly. The purpose of that chart was really as a sort of rough comparison to as many different jurisdictions that we could get data on. You raise a point that it's possible that there could be another universe of stops for those jurisdictions that we're not including in the data that we have. But I think the sort of overall message we're trying to get across in that chart is every time that we looked, we didn't find a city that was making rates at that stop rates at this rate. It's certainly possible, again, that one or two of those like jurisdictions could come at the same rate, but I think overall it seems like Nashville's at least on the high end of that spectrum.
Yeah, I was just wanting clarity as it relates to the scope, because what I find interesting is that so Jacquees Clemens, he was fatally shot in 2017, February 10th, 2017. And then this body overwhelmingly supported the implementation of body cameras. And for whatever reason, we are stalled. So I asked the question as it relates to your scope, why wasn't body cameras more of a larger part of this work, being that Gideon's Army has already done so much work as it relates to stops and that data, and we already have that. For us to move forward with the conversation for public safety and so forth, we are at that next level. But that's why I was clarifying as it related to scope. And it sounds like you weren't charged with from the administration to dissect or get involved into that aspect of this. I guess the policing project isn't. We're not there yet as it relates to this. This is just you providing us the overall recommendations as it relates to better policing.
Just to be clear, sorry, when you say we weren't invited, do you mean as to body cameras or what comes next?
Yes.
Yeah. So we two separate sets of comments. I mean, we think that these are things that ought to be done, and we stand ready to help if help is needed. But if it's not, we're happy to rest on the recommendations that we have made. We feel pretty strongly about all of this. We've done a lot of work around body cameras. I know that people are impatient to have them here, and I don't have any particular insight or knowledge as to the timeline for all of that. I've worked in other jurisdictions where it turns out to be tricky to get the body cameras deployed. It is essential that you have good policy in place before those cameras are deployed. We just had a convening in New York, and our first panel was about body cameras and the fact that they're very expensive, and unless the right policies are put into place, they don't justify the expense. And so you need the right set of policies to ensure transparency and legitimacy with regard to the cameras. And we've offered, to be honest, we've mentioned some aspects of this, not all of it, to the chief, and he's been amenable to having help with some of it.
All right. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Scott Davis. 1 second. One more second. There you go.
Thank you, Chair. Well, not to touch on, but Councilor Vercher touched on one aspect I was going to address is that, and I'm trying to make this as politically correct as possible. Okay. Gideon's Army gave us some information, did a great study. Then your organization does a study, different in some ways, but yet pointing out some of the same issues. When the Gideon's Army study came out, there were people in positions, I don't think anybody in this chamber, but there were officials that kind of said the study had issues, it had flaws. I'm sure the study may not have been 150% perfect, but it was right. And I knew it was right then. Now, this is not an attack on your organization, okay? You were invited to do a study, and you came in and you did the study. And you showed that Gideon's Army, in my opinion, was right, but at least if someone disagrees with me, they had a point. We have a problem. 68%? Now, where I'm going with this, and in this city, we have a problem of this, why we have to stop, okay? And I am not attacking your organization. sometimes when organizations that may look a little different sometimes say there's a problem, we don't address it, and I'm happy we're going to address it now, but we don't address it until someone that looks a little bit different says the same problem. And that's what we're dealing with, the disparity studies in the business community. For years, African Americans have been saying in this city, hey, we have an issue over here. But until someone else says there's a problem, then it's, hey, we got a problem. Happens the same way when, with sexual harassment towards women. And women say we had problems for years. But until a white man says we have a problem with sexual harassment, now we have a problem, we have to fix it. And I'm just wanting to put the point here that we know there's a fire. We don't need 5 other agencies to tell us that there's a fire when we see the fire and smell it with our eyes. And where I'm going with this right now is I agree the police department may be underfunded in certain ways, but I'm going to say what I said to you before. This policing policy does not work. Mayor's office, this policing project does not work. Council, it does not work without the community oversight, which passed by over 51% or 53%, 60%. Thank you, Councilman Mendez, appreciate that. So obviously, 60% of the city has known that there's been a problem for a long time. So my question is, how can your program work in conjunction with the community oversight that just passed in this city?
Thank you for that, Councilman. We've talked about some of this before, and I just want to, and I don't want to call out any particular member of the council, but I had a similar conversation earlier today with another member of the council, and it pains me deeply the perception, which I see the basis for entirely, that folks say there's a problem and they're not heard, and then we wander in from New York and all of a sudden there's a problem. The problem's been persistent. I think we contributed in an important way by being able to say that the problem, in addition to the racial disparities, was that that we can show that the stops don't work. And I think that has been persuasive to MNPD. As to our role with the COB, as I stressed from the beginning of this talk, we at the Policing Project thinks it's essential to have bodies of the public, which we are not here in Nashville, that are engaged with the police about what public safety should look like. And that's true of city councils, and it's true of oversight boards. And we're happy to help anyone in Nashville get toward a healthy, well-resourced system of public safety in any way that we can.
Thank you. Remember, council members, we've only got about 7 minutes, so get to it. Council Lady Berkeley, you're recognized. Baby.
Now I'm recognized. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for being here and for reiterating information and putting it in a new format to keep us moving forward with our solution. I want to, I guess, move forward with the question that Councilmember Davis asked, which was, you've offered to help us, the council, community oversight board, police, community, all work together to come up with a new strategy for neighborhood policing. And I guess I would love to hear from you sort of what menu you would offer. Would that be laying out best practices from other cities on what they can do and perhaps setting up additional community engagement meetings? I mean, I remember the big meeting we had that Lionel Matthews set up in 2015, I think it was, where we had it was a big forum, community discussion, identification problems and looking towards solutions. And if you could just sort of lay out what you could offer towards us as we try to move forward with that, I'd love to hear what our options are.
Well, I'm happy to tell you what it is that we do, what's within our wheelhouse and what's not. But I'm also very conscious of the fact that the fight that was led for the Community Oversight Board reflected an important sentiment in this community that the community be responsible for policing. And so we are not that community. We are consultants from afar, in a sense, though I obviously lived here for quite a long time and care passionately about the city. But I think one thing that's important is for the COB to be stood up and to find its way. It's somewhat different than in other cities. There's, every city confronts the best way to stand up a COB or a civilian review board. This one is unique. It has back-end authority over matters of investigation and discipline about citizen complaints. It also has recommendatory power on the front end. We actually did a study. We haven't had time to get it up on our website, but long ago, because we were curious whether we're about front-end accountability. But the problem in this country is that, other than, for example, in LA, which is one of the rare cities that has basically a citizen-led police commission. They set policy for the department. It's quite unique in the United States, but there are a few places that do that. We've been conscious of the need for that in some jurisdictions, and it's hard to stand up bodies out of nothing. And so one idea that we've had is, well, what about all these civilian review boards? We looked at their charters, and a number of them have authority that they don't use to make recommendations on the front end. And I think it's super important. I think it's really, really important for the, this is my 2 cents and they may disagree, but for the Community Oversight Board to engage not only on the back end, but to think about the front end. I think that's important. They should do what they choose to do. I can tell you what we do. We do, and again, I shortchanged describing us because in the interest of time, but we do best practices around policing policies. We do cost-benefit analysis of policing practices. We work with social scientists to do that. We work on transparency measures, helping departments get their websites up, their policies up on the web, plain English policies, and perhaps not necessary here in Nashville at the time, but we do a lot of work trying to understand the mechanisms that would permit front-end accountability. And the other thing that we do, actually, because we're doing it in Chicago right now, is certainly help with neighborhood policing. Whether we're the right folks or not, I'm confident, and I think the department feels confident, that they will need some outside help to transition from policing in one way to policing in another way.
All right, thank you. Councilman John Cooper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to say to Professor Friedman, we miss you in our neighborhood. It wasn't so long ago you were here. A couple of quick questions. I know you were limited to time. Was there ever any evidence, or what was the evidence to support all these traffic stops to begin with? Or was that kind of just a late 1990s, early 2000s fashion?
That's a terrific question to which I don't know the answer, though I want to qualify that. I've written a book about policing. I've studied policing at great length, and I don't know that I can offer you a coherent understanding of where that theory of ramping up the stops came from. It happened in a lot of places, so it was obviously discussed in policing organizations. I live in a city that had an extraordinary number of street stops, but I don't know that I explained as best I could the theory behind it, but I don't. That's the best I can do.
And then very quickly on the strategic vision for public safety, your very important third point here. Would you outline briefly, if you could because of time, some of the basic choices behind such a strategic vision that a community should be considering?
Sure. What's the right size of the department for the jurisdiction? What styles of policing they deploy and in what places? How they're equipped. If you're using a neighborhood policing model, you may want to get more officers out of cars and on bicycles or segways or whatever they're on, or on foot. Structures that you may want to set up in the city so that neighborhoods can themselves have voice in how they're policed. We're working on a project that's, at the very early stages called Reimagining Public Safety, in which we actually want to challenge people to ask the following question. If we were released from the path dependence of history and didn't assume that we assured public safety through simply folks, armed folks in cars, what would it look like? And one of the things we just did in New York is we co-hosted with the NYPD and the Open Society Foundation a summit on racial disparities that brought together the directors of all of the city agencies to ask, yes, we see disparities in policing, but how many of those are downstream effects of decisions being made in other parts of government? when the police respond to things, should they be co-responding? And there's some models for co-response with social services or psychologists. So there's any number of choices that one could be considering. It requires a little imagination, but I think it's an important thing for a community to do. And I think communities that have tried some version of this, there aren't a lot of them, but they've done some, often find that it's a way to unite. You know, one of the advantages of front-end accountability is that you can unite the department and its officers, who are also a vital part of the community, one that we always make sure that we work with and talk with the officers, and the broader community around a vision.
All right, thank you. We are right at 4 o'clock, and I know we have at least 5 other people that like to talk, so I would like to ask Council Lady Vercher, would you be okay if we go 10 minutes? All right, so we're going to go another 10 minutes, so please, council members, there are 5 of you, make it short and quick, and so we can get through it, because I know everybody wants to talk. Councilman Glover, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I'm trying to look at this in a manner of trying to get it and understand it as far as the data that we've looked at. I mean, I have to agree with other council members who say we've already known some of the information because of Gideon's Army. When you looked at other departments, one of the things that I've noticed, and this is because of being on budget and finance, and also looking at the staffing with the police department and I'm going to say a per capita of what we have looked at here only, because that's what I've compared it to and looked at. And I think you brought out, correct me if I'm wrong, the amount of overtime we've got, that they don't necessarily love it because we're actually overtiming them to death. And so with that, does any of those play into perhaps some of the data that could have been found, number one, and then number two, I know specifically in my district that we have where cars aren't necessarily working on a given day, when zones should be covered, but they can't be covered because the equipment's not operational. So instead of having officers out in their own cars, they'll double them up because the officer showed up, the equipment's not able to be functioning and operational. And so was any of that information taken into account as opposed to just raw data on stops? I mean, in other words, if I sit down and I want to understand what's going on with schools, and I kind of look at the parenting and other aspects of it, the socioeconomics, the demographics, everything about that, we can kind of zero in from a learning standpoint. That is really my question, because again, on some of the other stuff, nothing new that we didn't already kind of know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think it's a great question. I just want to preface it by pointing out that, again, you do know something now that you didn't know before that's vitally important, which is that these stops are not effective at reducing crime. And that's important for a city to know. So if you want to reduce the stops, you can at least have some confidence that your crime rates aren't going to respond. The response from police departments very often is, if we do X, crime rates are going to go up. And so we've looked at a lot of data to answer that question. But you're right about all those other questions. I think they're terrific questions. We weren't asked to look at them. I think a strategic planning process would definitely want to look at them. You know, the city's, again, grown in some great ways, great in the sense of magnitude, and that needs to be accounted for. You know, in answer to Councilman Cooper's question, I stopped in the interest of time, but I'll also mention officer training, officer wellness. You know, officers, there's a saying about police officers that the only thing that they hate more than things staying the same is things changing. And so I understand a natural resistance to some of this, but, you know, very often the fact is that the officers' lives can be improved by focusing on some of these other issues. I also understand that some folks, particularly in the community of color that are concerned about policing, think, whoa, not more policing. But there's been good research done to suggest that policing is better when it's not under-resourced. So one of the least desirable things is an officer that's out on the street stretched out because they're working a lot of overtime. That's not in anybody's interest, though many cities do that because it's cheaper to do that than to hire additional officers. So they're all great questions. They all are things that ought to be looked at.
All right, thank you. Council Lady Hurt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm having a little trouble in terms of how I can ask the questions that I have. But there have been some really good points made, and I appreciate my colleagues for having done so. But a lot of this, I think, comes down to political will. And they say that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I want to know, did you find if Metro Police Department feel like there is a problem in your research? Because if they don't think that it's broke, then why would they look to fix it? And to that, you know, you talk about the socioeconomic status of it, and I think the disparities of the crime and disparities of the business community, like Councilman Davis said, you know, when you've got poverty in that targeted area that they look for the crime, I think all of that connects. So I also want to know if you all looked at the connectivity of departments. For instance, when they had Hope 6 and they moved some of the housing places, people were displaced and they had to go to other housing facilities where there's territorial claim when you're talking about west to north and all of that. And if they strategized to anticipate more crime because of territory, and also to that point, when they targeted crime, did they look at the staffing? Meaning, do they have more staff at the places where there's more crime? Do they have more detectives and investigators at the precincts where there's more crime? So those three questions concern me. Did you all look at that in any way?
We did not look at the second. Those are good questions, and these issues about territory and gentrification are, you know, in any city that's growing are very common. I have a colleague who runs a center at the law school on affordable housing who's very interested in the relationship between gentrification and policing and the way that groups coming together and sometimes colliding and how that affects policing in those areas. So we did not, but it's an important question. On the third, I'm going to stall and ask Alex. I mean, I suspect we have some of the information, but we probably didn't look at it to correlate staffing. He's shaking his head. Staffing and the resources in these high crime neighborhoods. I will tell you that there are programs going on, some, you know, to try to deal with some of the violence in the city, and those under a strategic plan might be deployed differently. I want to go to your first question, though, because I think it's super important. They're all important, but that one in particular, I think. We've met in meetings with the chiefs and the commanders at MNPD, and I think what's vitally important about this report is that from the perspective of the police department and getting their ear, it's very helpful to be able to make clear that this strategy isn't working. And though they asked us hard questions, and it's, you know, if I came to you and told you something you'd believed for a long time wasn't true, it would take you a little while to process that, and that is a fair description, but they accept what they have seen and have been full of questions about alternative strategies. Some people are perhaps more open than others. You, I think, know that Nashville has a very diffuse strategy for its command structure here, where each precinct makes a lot of its own decisions, but there's interest, certainly in some of the precincts, in trying some of this. So I think that's a great opportunity, and in fact, it may be one of the times in which there's a virtue to the diffusion, because you can try things in different precincts on their own.
Council Lady, we've got more people. We got to get it going.
Oh, I understand, Chair. I understand, but I personally think that it's egregious to the community that we would only give 1 hour to such an important issue that we have here. And the other question that I wanted to know is that did the mayor and the other people anticipate the findings that you were able to provide?
I have no idea if either Mayor Berry or Mayor Briley had a thought about what these findings would show. We showed them to Mayor Briley at one point at an earlier stage, and I think he was struck, as we all were, when we saw the work from the folks at the Stanford lab about particularly, I mean, I don't know that there was surprise about the disparities, but certainly the fact that the traffic stops were just not working.
All right, thank you, Mr. Friedman. We had more in the queue, but we are up out of time. And to the council lady's point about the time, I understand, but we have more time. We can schedule these at a later time. One, I thank all the council members who were able to show, all of you in the gallery who were able to show up. We appreciate it. And with that, I call this meeting to a close.